Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're going to be taking a look at something pretty tragic that happened over in Germany.
Yeah.
An attack on a Christmas market in Magdeburg.
hmm
And, we've got a whole bunch of news reports here we're going to be picking apart. And really, our goal is to help you understand not just what happened, but how this all fits into the bigger picture in Germany.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation, especially with elections coming up in February.
Right.
There's a lot of different
Yeah.
political and social tensions that are already kind of at play here, and this attack has really kind of thrown gasoline on the fire.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us to start with the attack itself just to, set the scene.
Absolutely.
So it happened on a Friday evening.
hmm
Imagine, the Christmas market.
Yeah.
It's bustling.
Right.
People everywhere. The smell of, roasted almonds, glühwein in the air.
Yeah.
And suddenly a car comes barreling through the crowd.
The driver actually, and we'll talk about him a little bit more later,
Okay.
but he actually used emergency exits to get into the heart of the market.
Oh, so it wasn't just like he drove in from the street. He
No, I mean,
found a way to actually get.
he found a way to get right into where everybody was.
Oh my God.
And drove for a full 3 minutes before he was stopped.
3 minutes. That's a long time.
It's a long time.
To be driving through a crowd of people.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, the terror, the chaos.
Yeah.
And sadly, 5 people were killed, including a 9-year-old boy,
Right.
and over 200 injured.
Over 200. Yeah, and about 40 of those are considered critical. So,
Wow. So a lot of people really seriously hurt.
yeah.
And then you've got the suspect himself,
Right.
who makes this whole thing even more complex because he's been identified as this guy, Taleb A,
hmm
a 50-year-old psychiatrist, originally from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
But he's been living in Germany for almost 20 years.
Almost 2 decades. Yeah, this is where it gets interesting because this guy actually has a history of speaking out against Islam.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
it's like he's rejecting his own
Kind of. Yeah.
background in a way.
Yeah.
But then potentially using that background to carry out this horrible act.
Right.
It really makes you think about identity
Yeah.
and, belonging and how someone could become radicalized in that way.
Absolutely. And then you add on top of that the political climate in Germany right now,
Right.
especially with those elections in February.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this party, the AfD Alternative for Germany.
Uh-huh.
They're a far-right party that's been gaining a lot of popularity, particularly in the former East Germany where Magdeburg is.
Now, for those of our listeners who might not be totally up on German politics,
Right.
how significant is that this is happening in former East Germany?
Well, it's significant because the AfD is polling in second place nationally, which means that their views on things like immigration, national identity, and even how they're reacting to this attack
Right.
are becoming more and more influential.
So they have a real chance of actually, getting into power
They do.
in a significant way.
Yeah.
And it turns out that this Taleb A, our suspect, was actually a supporter of the AfD online.
He was.
He was also a fan of Elon Musk, who coincidentally has recently expressed support for them as well.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting.
So all these connections start to kind of come together.
Yeah, you start to see these threads,
Yeah.
and it makes you wonder,
Yeah, and then to add even another layer to that,
Right.
this connection to the AfD and all that is really interesting when you consider his background,
Yeah,
because he was helping Saudis who denounced Islam flee to Europe.
that's right.
The
Yeah.
prosecutor has suggested that maybe he was frustrated with how Germany was handling these refugees.
Potentially, yeah.
And that could have been a factor in the attack.
It's hard to say.
I mean, it's just
so tangled.
layer upon layer upon layer here.
You've got this individual with this really complex history,
Right.
seemingly kind of caught between these different cultures and ideologies.
Yeah.
And now his actions have become this focal point
Right.
in this already really heated political landscape.
And then you bring in how all the different political parties are reacting to this. And it's like everybody's got their own.
Exactly. Yeah. They're all reacting in different ways. And a lot of it aligns with their existing stances
Right.
on things like immigration and security.
Yeah. So it's almost like this attack has become a tool
Yeah.
for them to kind of further their own.
Yeah. It's a way to kind of push their own agendas
Yeah.
and their narratives
Yeah.
and capitalize on this really tragic event,
Yeah.
which is, I think, something that's really important for us to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. we can't lose sight of the human cost of all of this.
Right.
Amidst all the politics and everything else that's going on. This was a horrific event that affected a lot of people.
Yeah, and their families and the community as a whole. It's important to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've got the AFD who are using this to push their remigration agenda.
Remigration was?
Yeah, it's essentially calling for mass deportation of immigrants.
Wow.
A pretty extreme stance.
Yeah.
That's obviously sparked a lot of debate.
Right.
And even some protests. There was actually a demonstration in Magdeburg the day after the attack.
Oh, really?
Where a group was seen carrying a remigration banner.
So, like, right in the wake of this tragedy,
yeah,
they're already kind of...
Yeah, using it
for their own...
kind of push their agenda.
Yeah. Were there any problems at this demonstration?
There were reports of a few scuffles.
Oh, wow.
And minor disturbances.
So you can really see how raw the emotions are.
Yeah, absolutely. People are on edge.
Yeah.
And it's not just the AFD that's reacting strongly. You've got parties like the Christian Democrats and the Free Democrats calling for increased security and better coordination between, the federal and state authorities.
So it sounds like they're really focused on preventing this from ever happening again.
Yeah, they want to make sure that something like this never happens again.
Right.
Which is understandable, but, is that enough?
Yeah. Is that really addressing the root of the problem here?
Right. Are there deeper issues that need to be looked at?
Yeah, exactly.
And you've also got figures like Sarah Wagenknecht.
Okay.
She's the leader of the left party, the BSW.
Okay.
And she's taking a bit of a different approach.
How so?
Well, she's been very critical of the authorities, saying that they ignored warnings about this suspect.
Oh, wow.
And, of course, she's using this to kind of reinforce her party's stance against what she calls unchecked immigration.
So, again, it's almost like every political party is kind of trying to fit this tragedy into their existing narrative.
Yeah, it's all about how they can use this to their advantage. Yeah.
And push their own agendas.
Yeah, it's a shame because, shouldn't the focus be on the victims here and their families?
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get caught up in all the political back and forth.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about the human cost of this attack.
Right.
This community is grieving.
Yeah.
Lives have been shattered. But it's important to note that even amidst all the political maneuvering, there has been a lot of support.
That's good to hear.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz actually attended a service for the victims.
Oh, wow.
And people from all walks of life have come together to show their solidarity and, offer comfort.
It's good to see that there's still that sense of, community and compassion, even in the face of something so horrible.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, humanity can shine through.
It really can. Okay, so we've talked about the attack. We've talked about the suspect.
Right.
We've talked about the political climate.
But there's another piece to this puzzle that I think really adds a whole other dimension to this story.
Right. This is where we get to the Saudi connection.
Okay.
And it's pretty significant because it turns out that the Saudi Arabian government had actually raised concerns with Germany multiple times.
About the suspect.
About his social media posts.
Wow.
And this has been confirmed by both a Saudi and a German security source.
So they had flagged him as a potential concern even before the attack.
Like, it seems that way, yeah.
What kind of information were they sharing?
That's a good question. And why wasn't it acted on?
Yeah.
These are all questions that investigators are going to need to answer.
This is huge, right? Because if they had this information and didn't do anything with it, that's a major problem.
It raises some serious questions about international cooperation and information sharing when it comes to these kinds of potential threats.
And it's a tough situation, right? Because on the one hand, you want to take all potential threats seriously, but you don't want to infringe on people's freedoms based on just their social media posts.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And this is where critical thinking is so important.
Yeah.
We have to carefully examine all the information that's available, consider all sides of the story, and resist jumping to conclusions.
It just seems like with every new piece of information that we find, it just adds another layer to this.
Yeah.
This already incredibly complex.
It's like peeling back an onion. There's just more and more layers.
Yeah, and it leaves us with all these big questions about, security and immigration and the role of social media in all of this. What does this mean for Germany moving forward?
Well, I think this attack has really exposed some vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Not just, in terms of like physical security at these events.
Right.
But also just in how information is shared and acted upon.
Yeah.
Both domestically and internationally. This is kind of a wake-up call. And I think the choices that Germany makes in response to this
Right.
are going to have a lasting impact on their future.
So what kind of choices are we talking about here? What are some of the paths forward?
Well, there's definitely going to be pressure to increase security measures.
Yeah, especially with the elections coming up.
Especially with the elections,
Yeah.
you'll probably see more police presence at these events,
Right.
tighter controls, potentially even increase surveillance.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that security measures alone
Yeah.
aren't going to solve the whole problem.
Right. It's not just about, putting up more barriers and
Exactly.
having more police. It's about,
There are deeper issues at play.
yeah.
And I think that this attack has also reignited the debate around immigration and integration.
Yeah, especially given the AFD's stance on that whole remigration thing. I mean, do you think this is going to give them more momentum going into the elections?
It's possible, unfortunately. These kinds of tragic events can be exploited to fuel fear and division.
Yeah.
And the AFD could definitely try to capitalize on this.
Yeah, play on people's fears.
Exactly, by, calling for stricter immigration policies.
Right.
Appealing to people who are already feeling like maybe Germany's becoming less safe. But it's also an opportunity for other parties
Yeah.
to step up and offer maybe a more nuanced and compassionate
Right.
approach to immigration.
Yeah.
One that really focuses on integration and addressing those root causes of radicalization.
And how do you think this is all going to affect Germany's relationship with Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Especially given that they had given these warnings about the suspect.
It's a tricky situation. I think there's definitely going to be a need for more transparency and accountability.
Yeah, Germany's going to want answers.
Germany's going to want
From
answers
Saudi Arabia.
about what they knew and when they knew it.
Exactly. And that could lead to some, tense diplomatic exchanges.
Yes. Potentially, but it's also a chance for both countries to strengthen their cooperation
Yeah.
when it comes to things like counterterrorism efforts and information sharing.
Right. So maybe something good can come out of this,
Hopefully.
at least on that front.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think this whole situation is just a reminder of just how challenging it is to navigate this globalized world that we live in.
Absolutely.
Where these issues of security and immigration are all interconnected.
Yeah.
And they require us to work together
Right.
to find solutions.
Absolutely.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this.
It is.
But I think it's important to remember that we all have a role to play as individuals
I agree.
in making the world a safer and more understanding place.
Yeah. We need to engage in these difficult conversations. Even when they're uncomfortable, we need to challenge misinformation and prejudice.
Yeah. Stand up for what's right.
Exactly. And most importantly, we need to show compassion and support
Yeah.
for the people who have been affected by this tragedy.
Yeah. And I think in the midst of all of the political analysis and all of the debate,
Right.
we can't forget about the human cost of this attack.
Absolutely.
5 people lost their lives.
Countless others were injured.
And an entire community has been traumatized.
Right. Their stories deserve to be heard and remembered.
Did you? And I think despite the darkness of this event,
Yeah.
we've also seen the strength of the human spirit.
We have.
People coming together to offer comfort, to rebuild.
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder that even in the face of tragedy, hope and resilience can prevail.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with this thought. How can we as individuals contribute to creating a more inclusive and compassionate society, one that is resilient in the face of adversity and committed to building bridges rather than walls?
That's the question.
It's a challenge worth embracing, a responsibility we all share. Thanks for joining us.